Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be. Welcome to Becoming Untriggered podcast. Today we're looking at the conscious as well as the unconscious reasons that you may have picked your romantic partner. And as always, looking at any root causes in your own childhood.
This is a really interesting subject because it comes up with a lot of the partners and the couples that we work with. There's a point in time where in the relationship, well, so you get with somebody, maybe you don't know why, there's an attraction, there's a conscious attraction, but also there's something underneath. Sometimes it leads to problems and challenges in the relationship.
Yeah, I think it depends on how much of the attraction is based on a need. Counselors, whatever therapists say that love, romantic love, should be as unconditional as parental love, but it very often isn't. Very often we are looking to have needs met, perhaps childhood needs or existing adult needs from another person. So it's about when that need is perhaps no longer being met, and that's when the issues will come up because the other person will realize they don't want to do that anymore. The initial maybe physical attraction has worn off a little bit and they're not going to be that doormat or they're not going to be that people pleaser.
You're talking about the trauma bond there, all the unconscious stuff that makes you attracted to that person. And the idea is, as we've worked hard to do as individuals and in a couple and with the people we work with, the idea is to heal the part of you that needed the trauma bond in the relationship. And the conscious stuff that's left, that is often the determinant of if there's a future of the relationship or not. How much of it was conscious, how much of it was attraction, how much of it was shared interest.
The problem is, it's not like you know how to pick the perfect partner. Healing is relational. We grow in relation to other people. Trauma is created in relation with someone else, and it is healed in relationship with someone else. So it often becomes a case of learning what you need and who you are through various relationships. So I'm always amazed actually at people that got together when they were like, 12, 14, because neither of them has done any inner work, or they've both done a huge amount because you're such different people. And to learn what you want from just that one person is pretty impressive. I know that for me, a big part of learning who I am has been trying different things out. And I remember actually saying to someone, because I'm divorced, that I was divorced, and they were like, oh yeah, your starter marriage. And this wasn't a friend saying that, this was like a renowned healer. And I was like, you're what? He said, a lot of people have to make a lot of mistakes through that commitment that is marriage or a serious relationship before they take responsibility. And that's, I think, why we both work with parents. It's having those kids and that commitment that inspires in you that then makes you look much more closely at an intimate relationship and your choice of partner than perhaps you would if the kids weren't there. So you can't avoid it. There's going to be a trauma bond. There are going to be unconscious reasons that you met that partner.
I think that's a good question. Are there any of our listeners out there that haven't got a trauma bond? All the people we come across have got a trauma bond. We certainly did. All of our clients have. And if I look around, my friends and family, maybe most people have.
You've got a couple of friends who have ended up with childhood sweethearts or teen sweethearts. Is that issue free? I mean, the very fact that they've picked childhood sweethearts, what does that say? That's one need being met, the need to feel young and all the things associated with their early relationship. I think there's always an element of a trauma bond. The test of a good relationship is whether you can identify that and work with it together.
So let's talk about the type of unconscious attraction or trauma bond. The first one is parental projection, and this can work one of two ways. A lot of men that I work with, and my experience actually in my 20s, was unconsciously projecting one of my parents onto a partner. I was attracted to somebody who had the same qualities actually as my father. So a bit absent, wasn't available, was never going to give me what I needed as a partner. But for me, unconsciously, that was really attractive because in retrospect, looking back, if I could have got that love, if I could have got that person to see me, for me, that would have represented the win of getting my parent to see me.
And also, that dynamic was familiar to you. Your inner child would rather something she knows than try something different that might be more uncomfortable.
Maybe. I think there's definitely an element to that, but it was very painful. I think for me, it was definitely about another opportunity to try and get those needs met because I wasn't aware that I could meet them myself. I wasn't even aware that the needs were there at that time.
But you also, if we're talking about you also had expectations of a partner that mirrored what your mother role modeled to you. So it's a mixture of unconscious wounds and maybe unconscious expectations of what that gender should do and what a partnership looks like as well.
Part of that expectation was that I deserved unconditional love from a partner, which I think is right. And then part of me didn't think I deserved that and wanted somebody who was absent and couldn't give me that. I think I was seeking out maybe nurturing characteristics. The healing and the knowledge came when I actually started healing that wound. And I was like, that's who that person was. It was never even about her. It was about my dad.
That's going with the same. And then we've got going with the opposite, right? Well, I'm not going to generalize actually, because it is so much more complex than the same or the opposite. But many of our clients will seek to avoid pain. Perhaps that looks like perpetuating a wound. And to the degree to which, like you said, that wound is conscious and what it brings up for you as you grow in that relationship, those traits that you first loved that actually brought balance to the dynamic may then end up being the things you hate. And what comes to mind with me and you is that kind of balance of energy. Mine's more intense, yours is more reserved. And then I'm perhaps more driven. I don't know. I'm more fast and you're more laid back, more carefree. But there have been points in our relationship where I've seen those traits that bring balance to me, to the children, to this whole dynamic as really annoying. I've seen it, your laid backness as laziness. I've seen your reserve as lack of courage or lack of strength, which obviously has way more to do with me than it does you because you're kind of the same person. It's interesting to know what are the traits that you saw or maybe didn't seek out. They just created balance within the relationship at first that are then creating triggers later. And what is your part to play in that? I think we've both met in the middle. You've calmed me down for sure. Not just you, but lots of things have calmed me down and you are more maybe outspoken, motivated.
I personally don't think that's necessarily to do that much with the balance of the people. I think that's a lot to do with the healing of the wounds. If you're picking somebody because they're not your parent, then you're in trouble. If you're healing that parent wound and that person doesn't change, you're not going to have the same need for that person. You're not going to have the same attraction if you've healed that wound.
But unfortunately, many people haven't. So you're stuck in a relationship 7 years on or whatever it is, and suddenly maybe the way they parent irritates you. That Mr. Nice Guy is suddenly grows some balls. It's annoying. It's not strong enough. Or with me, with my ex-marriage, I went for safety, 100%, because my dad did not feel safe. But that safety very quickly, when I started to feel confident in myself, felt suffocating. I felt like I was being controlled. And I think when you're in it, it often happens. And it's how you overcome the trigger that it brings up in you or not.
You have to shift to some extent to then find that annoying. It's the whole shadow thing, shadow projection, being in a relationship with somebody you want, and then suddenly the mirror falls and
golden shadow projection is definitely part of it. Yes, you are attracted to the parts of yourself that you have not yet embraced. So you might find someone super fun or super organized. And those are actually traits that you are. they're in denial. They're in the shadow. You haven't yet found them. So that golden shadow projection will come down, because real life's not just about these traits. It's about taking out the trash, and who's taking out more time on themselves and things like that. That's when the reality of who that person is comes out. And you might then resent that person for embodying the qualities you haven't yet. And I know that we differ on this because we've talked about it before, but I think you feel that every relationship has the potential to overcome these wounds. I don't think every relationship does. I think it's about the age at which you enter into it, your emotional maturity. Yeah, I think some people just aren't suited. I don't think you can heal yourself into a specific relationship and make it work. I think some just have to break up. So it's a really interesting exploration of what is a wound. Are you willing and are you able to overcome this wound? And a lot of that comes into baggage. There's childhood trauma. And I just want to, again, for any new listeners, childhood trauma means attachment trauma. Attachment is the connection that you had with your mother, with your father. If that connection wasn't stable, wasn't predictable, wasn't consistent, wasn't unconditional, that's the template that you then carry forwards into other relationships. So I don't know whether childhood trauma can always be overcome in a specific relationship. And then you've got the other kind of trauma, which is the trauma from the relationship itself, baggage. Maybe it's infidelity. Maybe one partner acted really badly. Maybe one partner's got an addiction that they are not really looking at. This can cause deep-seated resentment. And unless that resentment is looked at, that's going to block you.
And the only way to get those qualities is to do the work. So if you don't do the work and that person is still them, right, you're going to get more and more annoyed because they are acting in a way that you desire and you know you can, but you're not. So the longer you're with that person, the more it's going to trigger you, the more it's going to annoy you. Definitely. Just to go back to the disagreement of opinions you were talking about, my stance is not that every relationship should stay together, but I certainly look at it as if you've got kids and the priority is to stay together. That means healing your own individual trauma that's affected the relationship, that created the trauma bond, and then dealing with the relational trauma. But if you get to a stage where you're like, okay, I've healed my trauma, but she's been really controlling the last 5 years, or she's been doing this, or she's been really volatile, she's been really anxious for the last 5 years, I'm not putting up with that anymore, I want a divorce, then you're not dealing with the traumas from the relationship. Because the anxiety, the control, the volatility, that was part of your trauma bond. It wasn't yours, but it was the other person's. So then you can't judge that person on the last 5 years. If you're going through this healing journey together, you're both dealing with your stuff. It's time to almost start again in the relationship and give it some time. And then if, okay, we're both healed, we love ourselves, but we don't want to be together anymore, that's when you can do, Gwyneth and Chris's conscious uncoupling.
Couple of points. The thing about the kids, I think you could argue that that's coming from your perspective of being a wounded child victim of divorce. I'm not saying that breakups don't cause their own form of trauma. Of course they do. And if that's the right thing for the couple to do, I think there are ways of doing it, maybe Gwyneth and Chris, that don't cause trauma. So I would say relational trauma can be a real sticking point. I think it's almost harder to get over than childhood stuff, because the childhood stuff doesn't have to be done so much in relation. You're dealing with your coach, your therapist, your counselor, whoever you're seeing, and that counselor, therapist, coach is not going to bring up the same issues. They're going to be that safe, secure attachment that you didn't get. Relationship baggage, if you're still living in the same house with the same issues, I think it's really, really difficult to let go.
I think it is difficult, but in my head, it's the same as childhood trauma. It's a repressed emotion because in theory, we're all just present human beings floating around on this planet. If you're holding on to anything, you're holding on to a repressed emotion. In theory, if both people have done their work, then we're always new human beings that are evolving. it's a choice to hold on to that old baggage. I know if the behavior is extreme, then it's difficult.
But don't you think it's interesting from some of the couples we work with, they are able to let go of the mother imprint, the father imprint, but it's harder for them to let go of their partner imprint.
Yeah. For me, that's a choice. I think some people heal and they're like, I want out of here. I don't want to put up with this anymore. I want a fresh start. I want to meet somebody as this new version of myself.
So again, going back to maybe bringing us back to the title, why you pick your partner. What are you picking your partner for? I think many of us aren't conscious of whether we're going into a long-term committed child-focused relationship. But if you're not willing to put in the hard work, then what are you picking them for? Just good times? Because you're a good pick right now? Things change. Becoming a parent changes you in a massive way and can bring up more triggers that wouldn't have been exposed if you didn't have children. So you're also dealing with that added layer of seeing your partner in a different role that might not be the role that you expected him to take or her.
The big thing is to recognize that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually quite a normal thing. And the key is to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and think it's necessarily the end of the relationship. It's just the point in time for both of you to do some work. And zooming out a little bit, I was listening to something this morning that was talking about how important these people are in our lives. It's not just about meeting great people that don't challenge us or don't push our buttons or don't trigger us. Some of the best people we can meet, and ideally your partner is one of those, is somebody that's going to challenge you to become a better person and shine a light on the stuff that is in your unconscious, because you don't want to be carrying that around. You want the light to be shone on it. You want to be releasing it. You want to be healing it. So actually, it's a positive thing.
And going back to my earlier point of not every relationship has the potential to last, for me, that was definitely what I felt was different about us, that I haven't felt with anyone else. And I don't know if that's a universal thing, if other people have felt the same thing, but I think it's probably the bottom line of your relationship, whether you irritate each other, whether you find each other interesting, whatever. Underneath it all is this person making me or encouraging me to be a better version of myself? And it doesn't matter whether that is through the conflict or through support. I became a better version of myself through conflict with you because you were pointing out my shit, as my kids do. My kids point out my shit. They push my buttons. Obviously, there's supportive ways, like when you said at the beginning, you really wanted someone to see you, your ex-girlfriend. I think that's something that I do well. I do see people and accept them without judgment. So I was able to do that for you without conflict. I think for me, that's the biggest bottom line. Another thing is triggers. This podcast is very much about being practical. I want people to listen to it, go, oh yeah, we're suffering from that, or we're struggling with that. How do we deal with it? So just a practical point to follow on from that point I just made about, do you feel this person is helping you to be a better person? However really painful it is, as is parenting, as we all know, is the trigger that you have with that person. Whilst we can say that if you are being triggered, it's your problem. You're the one with the reaction. So what is it that is unhealed in you that is causing the trigger? There's also something around there being a grain of truth in every trigger. So I'm going to be personal. I think our turning point in our relationship, when you said this comes up at some point in every relationship, was when my wound with you was that you weren't committed enough. So unpacking that a little bit, you could have said, oh, well, that's your wound. You need someone that's more whatever because of your childhood. And I went away and did that work, but you also went away and looked at how you might not be being fully committed. So whatever trigger comes up relationally, obviously not with children, it really is your issue. You're the adult. You need to deal with it. But in relational context, if there's a trigger, I think it's up to both parties to be really brutally honest with themselves and see where that trigger might be coming up from both sides.
I think it's about being open to, and it comes back to what you said. Are you committed to this relationship? Is there enough in this relationship for you to commit to? Okay, so if there is, then both of you have got to look at yourselves around the triggers in your relationship. just going back to your example, there was definitely an element of you not feeling committed to, and there was definitely, from my point of view, fear or hesitancy to commit. Part of it was because of my wounding. Part of it was because of the light that was being shone on all the shadow. And I was thinking, do I really want to commit to this person? But at that point in time, it came up in the relationship for you to deal with your stuff, but also for me to deal with mine, my fear of commitment, and then doubling down on my commitment to you and the kids and the family.
So these things are natural, as we've said. You are going to hit bumps in the road, 100%. If you have a healthy relationship, we haven't touched on the fact that if you don't, then there's maybe something to look at as well. Is there conflict avoidance? Is there putting up appearances? But these are very natural bumps that most relationships will come across. And the result is always growth. If it doesn't happen to be in that relationship and that you've picked the wrong partner, inverted commas, then okay, you will then face that next stage of growth with the next one. So it's never a bad thing to have to grow, however uncomfortable, because you are growing as a person. But it's always very important to remember that it's not just surface level. Yes, it's about attraction, physical, sharing ideals, values, beliefs, interests. And there's a whole other world underneath that, which may be brewing under the surface without you having realized it, and it needs attention.
Yeah. I just want to finish on a post I did a few months back. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was along the lines of, don't confuse a woman that wants you to be the best version of you as somebody that's just nagging you and somebody for you to run away from. A good relationship doesn't necessarily mean an easy relationship. And I think some men can look for ease in a relationship, quietness in a relationship. And maybe that's good for some people. But a partner, a woman that won't settle for anything less than the best version of you, I think is something to go towards and something to be invested in.
If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlynn.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.